Alberta Premier Danielle Smith spoke directly to Albertans in a televised address last night, announcing a referendum on measures to limit immigration to Alberta and changes she believes would give the province more rights under the Constitution.
Although sustainable immigration has always been an important part of our provincial growth model, throwing the doors wide open to anyone and everyone across the globe has flooded our classrooms, emergency rooms, and social support systems with far too many people, far too quick.
The referendum announcement comes amid a signature collection drive to get a citizen-initiated referendum on Alberta independence. Premier Danielle Smith joins me now. Premier, if the Citizens Initiative gets enough signatures, will the referendum you're announcing here include questions about Alberta's independence?
That would be our intention. There's two active citizens-initiated petitions right now, that one and one that's been started on the issue of coal development. And so if either of them get the requisite number of signatures and they're validated, our intention would be to also add that to the ballot question, yeah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting juxtaposition because one would be a series of questions about providing more power to the province, and one would be about moving the province away from the rest of Canada entirely. Is the aim in putting these questions around immigration and provincial services to Albertans to maybe blunt the message of the why Albertans should move away from Canada in an independence movement?
My approach from the beginning has always been, and it was my very first bill when I got elected, was a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I've seen for many, many years that there's an imbalance in the way Ottawa treats the provinces, and Alberta in particular. I think Quebec has managed to get a different relationship with Ottawa, and I think we should be moving towards that same kind of model as a more decentralized government, which is, I think, what our Constitution envisioned. Unfortunately, over 10 years, we saw a federal government that not only intervened in virtually everywhere provincial jurisdiction, but then also attacked our core industry, and it created a lot of frustration. And so I'm demonstrating that there is a better way. We can fix the relationship with Canada. And I think these are some of the issues that I heard when we did our Alberta Next discussion across the province. So I want to give Albertans hope again. And I'm hoping that if we can get some mandate to move forward on these things, this will address some of the thorny issues that we've seen in the past.
I ask about the juxtaposition, if only because I think some of the issues raised here are issues that you were championing not that long ago. We have a clip from an interview you gave in 2024. Let's just take a listen to that.
The fact that so many people have come to our province, I look at that as a positive, and we want to keep that going. That's why I've said, let's have an aggressive target to double our population. I'm going to put this out there because I've said that in the throne speech, and I want people to understand how important that is. We have to be that bastion of liberty, and people are going to want to come here, and we want to embrace them.
How do you square that with where we are today and the conversation we're having around limiting services and trying to limit the number of immigrants moving into the province?
Well, it's all a matter of pacing. I mean, I have no doubt that at some point Alberta will double its population. We have many times in the last century, and over the next century. I imagine at some point we're going to exceed British Columbia in our overall population. That's what some of the demographers are now saying. And maybe by 2100, we might end up doubling our population. But you can't double your population in 3 years, which is what it seemed like the federal government was doing. They brought 6 million people into the country in the last 4 years, and about 600,000 of those made their way to Alberta. It's just simply too much for us to be able to absorb, whether it's jobs, whether it's being able to find people homes and rental accommodation, whether it's room in our schools, room in our hospitals. Affordability across the board has created problems and tensions. So you have to have the right pace. I mean, I think Alberta will always be that beacon of freedom, and people will want to come here. But we also have to make sure that the reason they're coming here is for the reasons that we've had historically, that they've got a good paying job. If you come here with a good paying job and you're already a taxpayer, then you can move on a pathway to become a permanent resident and then ultimately a citizen. But with the number of temporary workers, international students, asylum seekers that the federal government let in over the last number of years, it's actually created a huge burden, not only on our social systems, but I think on social systems across the country, which is why you now see that even this federal government has had to reverse course on that.
But if you arrive in the province, if this goes through, and you arrive in the province with that good paying job, you still don't necessarily have access to health care. That's a huge added burden on either the company, the Albertan company that's bringing that person in, or the individual who's moved to Alberta.
Well, you're in Ontario. That's what you already do in Ontario. If you're a temporary worker, you're required to get your own health insurance for your family. And that is also affirmed just in recent weeks by the federal government that it's not part of the Canada Health Act that we have to provide all services to people who are here temporarily. You have to think about someone who's a temporary worker. They should have the same categorization as a tourist because they're not investing in staying in the province in the country permanently. They shouldn't be bringing their family. If they do, they should be taking care of their family themselves. I don't think any Canadian would think that if they were going abroad to work for a year, that they would bring their family and expect that country to pay for all of their services, including healthcare, education, and on and on. So we are an outlier. Alberta is an outlier when it comes to the country, and Canada is an outlier when it comes to the world. Other countries around the world have reasonable premiums and expectations that if you're coming to stay in the country temporarily, you've got to pay your own way.
I know people that are trying to attract employees into their companies in Alberta that are being eschewed by the United States, getting an H-1B visa. They're saying, no, no, come in here. And the pathway for them to come is a temporary visa. Does there need to be some, this sounds very black and white. The solutions aren't always going to be quite as clear as that, are they?
Well, it's true. I mean, this is why we want agreement more like the Canada-Quebec agreement from 1991, where Quebec took total control over the process for bringing in economic migrants. And that's what we would propose, is that we would be issuing an Alberta work permit to those who've managed to find a good paying job. And then we would be offering the provincial nominee status so they could become a permanent resident. And then Canada would determine their citizenship at some future point. And so that's what we're asking the public to affirm, is that if they have an Alberta work permit, permanent resident, and citizenship, that's one category. But if you're temporary, should those individuals be paying their own way when it comes to social programs? Because we have to get back to the kind of immigration system that worked so well for us for 40 years, which was based on coming as a high skilled worker, able to speak in one of the official languages, able to integrate immediately, and then have a pathway to permanent status. That's the kind of system that I think Canadians think we still have, because no one asked them if they wanted to take all of the restrictions off all of the different streams. That was something that was made unilaterally by the last government. They didn't consult with us. They didn't consult with the public. And so now this is our opportunity to say, do we need to have a few more guideposts around this and get back to the kind of system that we had before?
Your critics tell us, excuse me, your critics tell us that these are problems of your own making. You're the one that called for higher immigration levels. Your government is the one that tried to restructure the Alberta Health Services that didn't perhaps go as smoothly as they had hoped. What do you say to those who say, this isn't a problem with immigration, this is a problem with policy that was introduced by your government?
Well, I didn't make the decision to bring 6 million people into the country. That was most definitely Justin Trudeau's. When we began the Alberta's Calling campaign, and it was just prior to when I became premier, we had an unemployment rate of 4.9%. And we were very concerned with some big projects that were coming on with Dow Chemical and their net zero project for plastics. WestJet was expanding. We had de Havilland looking at building out to their new development for water bombers and many other things. We knew we needed skilled workers. So our intention was to attract skilled workers from low unemployment areas. I don't think we had no idea that the federal government was going to be irresponsible and take all controls off all methods of newcomers coming in. And so we do still want to make sure that people are coming here with a good paying job. That's what we've got to get back to. That hasn't changed, but we do have to make sure that we're having a more rational approach to those who are only here temporarily so that it doesn't put undue burden on our system.
You know, I began my career as a reporter in Quebec City in the years after the referendum there, and dealing with the fallout of all of the uncertainty that was injected into the economy in that province and the infighting that went on that dragged that uncertainty out. And I wonder how concerned you are in this moment of making sure that foreign capital and foreign businesses and Albertan businesses have the certainty they need to invest and to build and to grow in Alberta without sort of getting bogged down in constitutional debates like Quebec was for so long.
Well, that's what the MOU was about with Canada and with the new prime minister is restoring that confidence. I mean, nobody was writing stories about the damage to our economy at the federal level because of terrible federal policies and the suppression of capital. We calculated that it cost us about $500 billion worth of investment in our province. That's what we are trying to correct. And I think that Canada and Alberta are on track with that, with the new MOU. We've gotten rid of the emissions cap. We've got rid of the net zero power regs. We're working on an agreement on carbon pricing. And the 8 of the 9 bad laws that I identified have now been substantially repealed or revised. And that, I think, it sends a message of being open for business. The Major Projects Office sends a message of being open for business. And we hope to be able to get a pipeline to the BC coast on that list in very short order. So there's lots of things that I think we can do to be able to tell people that Canada is now on a growth track and undoing the damage of the past 10 years of the Trudeau government. And I think we're off to a pretty good start.
Speaking of uncertainty, we have the Supreme Court in the United States has ruled some tariffs were imposed in a way that shouldn't have been done. Trump has now said that he's going to impose a 10% global tariff on anything coming into the United States. What efforts have you made since that announcement? I know you've been making your own to make sure that Alberta oil is exempt, that CUSMA compliant, that we had under the old system will be able to be maintained so we can continue to provide, I think it's what, 25% of American refinery throughput is Alberta oil.
Yeah, we've been watching that decision, and we will be reviewing it as well as the president's response to it. I mean, clearly we want to maintain as much of a tariff-free environment between Canada and the U.S. as we can. Tariffs don't help American consumers, and they don't help Canadian consumers. That's been my position. And we are so fortunate at the moment that 97% of Alberta's trade with the United States is tariff-free, and we want to preserve that. We have a very good working relationship with the U.S. Ambassador, Pete Huckstra. We're going to continue with that. Nathan Cooper, who's my envoy in Washington, continues to meet with members of the administration as well as those across party lines, and as well as at the state level, because some of our biggest champions in the United States for maintaining that tariff-free environment are those who value the relationship, the open trade relationship right now, because it benefits their companies and it benefits their people. So we'll continue doing that work, and we're hoping that not only energy, but also all raw materials and inputs, whether it's forestry or critical minerals, hopefully, ultimately, aluminum and steel, softwood lumber, can also be included in that category. It just makes good sense that if you're going to have something that's an input cost, you're not going to want to increase that. That doesn't help American producers when they're taking those goods and turning them into value-added products. We just have to make sure that we're making that case. But we'll continue to press that.
Can you give us a sense, though, how you're making that case? Are you working the phones and calling Trump administration officials, Hoekstra, as you said? What can you do on a day like this to try to ensure that access?
Well, I can tell you that I'll be going down in just a couple of weeks to a CERA Week, which is in Houston. It's a major energy conference. We made a bit of a splash last year when we announced our new reserve studies, and we've got a few more announcements to make there as well. But I want to make the case, of course, to Americans, because everyone's talking about Venezuela. And yet I think they forget that Venezuela, their 300 billion barrels estimate for recoverable reserves happened when oil prices were at $140 per barrel. We have 160 billion barrels of reserve we can recover at today's prices with today's technology, with infrastructure that is modern, as well as with a democratic nation that has a very good trading relationship with the U.S. So if they want to have more product, whether it's South Bow's line that is being proposed to go to the Gulf Coast, or whether it's Enbridge expanding its main line, we want to continue doing business with the United States. Of course, we want to do business with other trading partners, which is why we're also prioritizing a new bitumen pipeline to the West Coast and expanding Trans Mountain. But that critical relationship with the United States, if they're looking for a new supplier, there's no better bet than Alberta. So that'll be my message when I go down.
Good stuff. We got to leave it there. Premier, thank you for this.
You bet. Thank you.